Item 3 is confirmation of minutes from the ordinary council meeting M5, 7th of June 2022. Do I have a mover? Tony Keeble, seconded by Councillor Hughes. Moving right along. Any comments, questions, confirmation? Nope. Put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Minutes. That'll be carried. Thank you. We move on to apologies, and there are none. We move on to obituaries and congratulations, and I'll go from my right tonight. Councillor Janus.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's in relation to obituaries. You would have read recently in our local newspapers that Mr Kevin Pitts from Myrtleford was given an OAM on the Queen's Birthday Honours weekend. He was also a Justice of the Peace, and sadly he passed away on last week, and he was put into the Myrtleford Cemetery on Friday. So we did manage to have his medal presented to him at the Myrtleford Hospital prior to the official presentation in Melbourne. So he'll be sadly missed, and he was a great community man and had been presented with Alpine Shire Awards for community service previously. So I just want to recognise Kevin and all the work that he'd done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Prime. No. Councillor Forsyth.
Certainly. Look, could I just, thanks, Mayor, I'd just like to concur with everything that Councillor Janus has said about Kevin Pitts. He was a larrikin. He enjoyed a joke. He would have people laughing in the aisles at supermarkets just with some of his jokes. But incredibly large character and someone who's going to be sadly missed.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make a mention of the passing of Michael Hayden, who was a life member of the United Bright Football Netball Club. Always there to cheer the boys on, and was always a nice smiling face whenever you were at the local games. So just make mention there. A big congratulations to Andrina Crome, the new president of the Bright Lions, and Dee Headley, the new president of the Bright Rotary, but also a big congratulations to Brian Kelly and Terry Gibbons, who are the outgoing presidents as well. As I've always mentioned, the community groups here in the Alpine Shire play a massive role, and I think these groups really receive not a lot for all of the work that they put out there, so a big shout out to them and the hard work that they do. That was it.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. I think at last month's meeting I also congratulated the Mount Beauty Medical Centre, and I'm doing it again this month. Dr Laura Zagorski there is a finalist in the Rural Workforce Agency as a outstanding contribution as a rural GP. And so congratulations for being a finalist. And interestingly, on the weekend, I ran into someone in the Ovens Valley who also talked incredibly highly of the service in the Kiewa Valley there. So that's a medical centre serving all of our shire. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keeble. And none from me. We move on to item 6, declarations by councillors of conflict of interest. Want me to say it? Yeah. Councillor Katarina Hughes has declared a general conflict of interest with respect to item 8.2.6, which is a planning application in Wandjilagong, and will leave the room. Item 7, any others? No. It's 8.2, it's in typos. Can that be noted in the minutes too, please? Thanks. So it refers to item 8.3.6 and it should be 8.2.6. So public questions. We have questions on notice which are written. I note that there is a gentleman in attendance who has submitted a letter, but I will read it anyway. This is from Brian Littlechild to the Alpine Shire Council. Could you please explain the implications to the Shire in regard to the application lodged with VCAT under section 149(1)(d) of the Planning and Environment Act 1987, which is a hearing listed for the 27th and the 28th of September 2022? And I will ask Ms Havercroft to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So section 149(1)(d) is a provision that allows for an appeal against the amount of time it has taken for a planning decision to be made. VCAT allows all parties to present their case and provide evidence of their grounds for a decision, which VCAT will then take. The applicant has confirmed, should the hearing proceed to VCAT in September, they will be doing so based on a November 2021 development plan that was lodged with Council. The November 2021 plan would not currently be approved by Council. However, the June 2022, as presented this evening, addresses initial assessment of the November 2021 and it's found to be generally in accordance with the planning framework and a preferred outcome, accommodating some stakeholder feedback. The implications for the VCAT hearing on the Shire is therefore that the November 2021 development plan would be the basis for any discussion and a decision at VCAT.
Thank you. Question 2 is from Dr. Sue Ronco. It's about the Stockman Mine Agreement, which is also on the agenda tonight. There's 2 questions, and I do allow 2 questions per person, so I will read them out. Do the current councillors consider a confidential financial agreement between a mining company and council regarding council-owned land to meet with community expectations regarding council transparency? That's question 1. Question 2 is, can any of the sitting councillors provide an explanation as to why there was no community consultation process undertaken during the period of 12 months when council were in the process of negotiating this agreement with the mining company? So I'm going to respond to that one in the first instance, but I haven't got any notes. Anyway, so a confidential financial agreement is something that council doesn't take lightly. We spend a lot of time making sure that our transparency is as good as possible, and if people go to the Know Your Council website, you could see that Alpine Shire has 0.49% of our decisions in closed meetings compared to something like 8%, or it's almost 9% I think by similar councils and just under 8% by other councils across the whole of Victoria. So we don't take council decisions in closed council meetings very often, but if there is a confidential financial arrangement, then that's a very important time to have a closed meeting. And part of what came out of that is the best financial agreement that we could for that, for the consideration of the offset land. So the next question is about providing community consultation and allowing for that during the 12-month period. Now, I'm not 100% sure which 12-month period has been referred to because the agreement's been in negotiation since 2013, I believe. But the general, so I'm going to answer the question fairly generally around community engagement. Community engagement can go from information right up to collaboration. And in information, there's not a lot of opportunity for community to change the outcomes, and at collaboration there is significant opportunity, and it's a sliding scale. So that's the way we think about community engagement currently. And so when that's put over the layer of the work that's been going on since 2013, there wasn't much opportunity for community to influence the decision. So what's come out of the decision is that not the decision's been finalised until later on tonight, but what's likely to come out of it is that there's a bit of high value Victorian or alpine habitat that will now be looked after to the best of Alpine Shire's capabilities and will be funded to do so. So there's the requirement for community consultation is not built into that decision making as part of the process, and we wouldn't be looking at raising expectations about being able to influence the decision by having a significant process around that engagement. So I hope that made sense. Yep, thank you. The next section, thank you, is questions from the floor. And if people have a question, could they please step up to the microphone and state their names and where they're from? You can put your hand up to say you have a question. Thank you, Mary. Ooh, that's all right. Wake us all up.
It's on. Oh, it's a lot louder too. After those two questions, these few seem inconsequential. Mary Pike, representing the Community Association from the Upper Kiewa Valley. TREC, which is a subgroup from our committee, were fortunate in getting a grant to install solar panels, battery, etc. on the stadium, and we just want to know at the moment what state that is in, whether there's progress happening on it or not, because I believe the money has actually gone to council, if I'm correct on that. It has been paid. So we just would like to be brought up to date with what the plans are in the future. I've got two other small questions. Do you want me to do them all at once, or do you want to just... Yeah, okay. The second one is just a plea for help as well. The left-hand turn lane from the Kiewa Valley Highway into Wannagatta Avenue is an absolute patchwork of potholes at the moment, and some of the potholes are now as deep as they are wide. A fortnight ago, I got some information from Michael Buckley about who to contact with Rural Roads Victoria and progress with that, and I've heard nothing since. So today I rang them and the guy said, oh yes, that's been dealt with. I said, well, I hate to tell you it hasn't. It's still, nothing has happened. And I just wonder if there's any way in which the Shire can actually support actions like that to get that sort of work done. And my third question relates to a question put to Council in April about using vouchers for removal of cut clippings from your garden rather than the 1 or 2 times a year that they are available at set times at the moment. And that was knocked back. I know there's a lot of people in our community who are keen to have that instituted so that they can decide when their trees are cut and when they get rid of their rubbish. I'm just wondering if the best way to go about doing that is to actually run a petition, and so you can actually see that people are in favour of that or not. They're my 3 questions.
Thank you, Mary. I wasn't counting. I'm going to hand the first question over to Mr. Will Jeremy about TREC and the installation of the panels and etc.
Thanks, Mary. So that project's been listed in Council's budget for delivery this year. So we've seen the funding that's been allocated. We have received the funding. We've assigned a project officer. The project officer briefed our team this week on where he's got to. He hasn't made a lot of progress, but it is on his list to work through this financial year. Your second question, I can respond on that. So we do have avenues to advocate with Regional Roads Victoria to try and get them to deliver a service. So we can certainly take that one up again through Michael Buckley's team and see what we can do there.
And the vouchers for garden waste is Ms Havercroft.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mary. So we've always adopted a user pay system at the transfer stations for taking clippings, but hopefully people will have seen on Facebook just this week we've put out the dates for the council to collect clippings and the registration process for that to happen. I don't want to stifle anyone having a petition or bringing their views to council officers to consider. So if that's something you want to do, by all means do it. But the plans we've always adopted when it's come before us have been that we keep a user pays so that all ratepayers aren't subsidising the use of the transfer station for the few that would like to take their clippings there.
I'd just like to add too, there will be a food organic, garden organic service introduced middle of next year. So that will allow for cuttings up to a certain size. Yeah, you've got to cut them again. Are there any further questions from the floor? No. Thank you. We will move on to presentation of reports by officers. And our first presenter this evening is our Director of Assets, Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Forsyth, seconded by Councillor Janus. Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremy, for a very succinct explanation of A, public consultation on this issue, B, the reason for the fact that it has been, for want of a better word, kept under wraps, and C, for the outcome that I believe we are going to have from such an agreement when we know that it's great to be able to lock up land like this and actually improve it. So thank you for the report.
Councillor Janus.
Thank you. Just a question, Mr. Jeremy. How much land is involved?
The offset area is an area of just over 2 hectares. So I think it's 2.14 from recollection, but it's that order of magnitude.
Thank you. There's an overall area beyond that as well, isn't there, or is it just...
Thank you, Councillor Janus, for testing me. The land The site itself is a much larger area of land, over 100 hectares from recollection, so this is a very small proportion of the site that comprises that parcel of land.
And that particular site has got specific native vegetation in there that can only be found in certain areas of our state. Is that correct?
That's correct, Councillor Janus. So there's sphagnum moss, which is a high-value vegetation, and it's only found in very specific environments, of which the alpine environment in Dinner Plain is one of those.
Yes, thank you. I've seen the result of people and animals mixing up with the sphagnum moss and desecrating those areas over time. And this, to me, is a very important piece of our environment that needs protection. Not only protects it per se, but it can also be used as an area for teaching some Indigenous skills to people who may want to learn to do cold burning for fire control, utilising our skills of our Indigenous people to teach people about land and country, seeing we're in NAIDOC week this week particularly. And it's there for in perpetuity. There is an income stream from that which can be utilised for education or whatever means necessary for that piece of land. So I commend this. I know there have been some side issues in relation to this, but I don't believe that they are necessarily relevant to this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Janus. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Keeble. I'll pick.
For those that are listening out there, you know, the mining operations for this offset is not in our shire, and that the offset is there because the mining company, through legislation, has to do an offset of vegetation of similar type, and Councillor Janus is right. It's great to be able to look after those bogs, those sphagnum bogs. They produce a lot of clean water that a lot of people drink in other parts of our state, so they're really important. But I just want to put it out there that, you know, that the mine site's not on, not that it matter where it is, but that, you know, it has to do some sort of legislative requirement in regards to offsets, and it just happens to be that that land that they can offset, we can offer that land for that offset, which is a good thing.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to further reflect on that, I did want to thank a lot of people reached out to me. They have a much broader concern about the project. I think this is a good result in our area in terms of securing and locking away some high value preserving land. Specifically the tailings dam, which is of an area of concern for many people that reached out to me on this. I would point to the Australian National Committee on Large Dams. This is a standard available that all other Australian large dams comply to those standards or seek to comply. They're based on international standards. And I'd recommend to those that are concerned about the project, but also the project proponent, lean on those standards to improve the transparency on the performance of that tailings dam and the concerns around it, because there are some really robust standards there that should be followed.
Any further comments or questions? No. Take the recommendation as it stands to the vote. All those in favour? Don't need an against. Thank you very much. The next item is 8.1.2, the Mystic Lane petition, and Mr Jeremy, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the purpose of this report is to inform Council and provide a response to a petition relating to access to Mystic Park. So I've provided a bit of background here, which is useful context, because Mystic Park is actually managed by Alpine Community Plantation and not by Council. So Alpine Community Plantation, or ACP, it's an independent community-based organisation established in 2013. It's a result of an innovative public, private and community partnership, and it is responsible for the recreational, educational, community use of almost 20,000 hectares of the HVP plantations land within the Alpine Shire, and that includes the Mystic Park. ACP has successfully secured an Australian government grant recently, so a grant amount of 1.35 million, and that was through the Black Summer Bushfire Recovery Grants Programme. And the title of that project is the Mystic Mountain Bike Park Infrastructure for Bushfire Resilience. So in 26th of April 2022, Council received a letter from ACP, and that was seeking to secure Council's in-principle support to the development of some land which is managed by Council for the purpose of providing an alternative access into the Mystic Park. On the 12th of May 2022, we know through our involvement in the ACP board that ACP met with the residents on Mystic Lane, so there was a representative group of 5 or 6 residents from Mystic Lane, and brought them fully and transparently up to speed with where the project's at, what ACP's thinking is, and what it's looking at as potential alternative options for access. And then subsequently on the 15th of May, Council received the petition, which is noted tonight. So the petition has 23 signatures, and it contains the following requests. Number 1 is that Council ensures that funding from the Black Summer Bushfire Recovery Grant that was announced several weeks ago is used to fully address the issue of access to Mystic Park, that all planning and permits related to the grant and the operation of the park result in a designated access road to the mountain bike park with a clear separation between all recreational activities and residential properties, and thirdly, that the residential amenity of Mystic Lane experienced prior to 2013 is restored. So that was the petition. I've noted a couple of issues of interest in this report. So the first is that Council has invested significant funds over recent years to address the concerns of the Mystic Lane residents, which I think Council is very well aware of because we've had that communicated to us on a number of occasions. So I've noted there we've funded the partial sealing of the access road in order to reduce the impact of dust, contributed to the funding of an automatic boom gate on the access road, which was aimed at controlling the traffic numbers up into the park, and also more recently funded the development of an in-park mountain bike shuttling pickup point, which was intended to keep the shuttling traffic within the park rather than having it shuttling up and down Mystic Lane. So Council has recognised the concerns, has invested significant funds. ACP is independent of Council, so Council doesn't direct the activities of ACP. Although Council does have an involvement because it has 2 representatives on the board of ACP, the representatives on the board of ACP are there to represent the ACP organisation, even though they're from Council's organisation. So I think that's a key point to note. The park is managed by ACP. It's an independent organisation. It has independently of Council secured a grant, and it is now working through a process to understand how to deliver what was committed through that grant application. So Council's involved, but ultimately ACP as the organisation is the responsible body for delivering on that grant funding. What I've put here, so as a conclusion, we've got representation on the board, so we've got a clear understanding of what ACP is working through, and we've got an ability there to help ACP deliver a good outcome. So the recommendation tonight from this petition is that Council notes the petition that's been received, that we again acknowledge the concerns of the Mystic Lane residents which relate to the access. We commit to continue working with the Alpine Community Plantation Inc. to support a successful outcome from the project funded through the Black Summer Bushfire Recovery Grant. What I've noted is that decisions relating to Council's land, so wherever there's a decision relating to land that Council is responsible for, that Council will work through that process in accordance with its community engagement policy, community consultation policy, and that we advise the main proponent of the petition of Council's decision.
Moved by Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Prime. Councillor Hughes.
I've had many discussions about this specific petition that was lodged to Council. Just making full note that, you know, the voices of these people are being heard, and as Mr Jeremy has explained, using the correct avenues to get that information across when any decision making is happening on this one. So it's not that you're being ignored. These things can take time, and the right processes have to be done in order to get things changed and moving along. So, you know, we always encourage people to speak up when they feel that they have something to say, and we applaud them for noting this petition, and we'll take it from that point, but just keep funneling those things through us, and we hope that we can get the best outcome for those involved.
Thank you. Councillor Prime.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, similar sentiments there to Councillor Hughes. Thank you, Mr Jeremy, for explaining that very clearly. So I feel that was really easily understood. Like Councillor Hughes said, we do take these issues very seriously, but there's limitations to what council can do sometimes. So I think we're just working within the best of our ability here. And thank you for showing some initiative here to get the petition going. So appreciated.
Any further comment or questions? Councillor Forsyth.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Just some clarity, please, Mr Jeremy. Mystic Lane itself is actually a council-operated road. So are the concerns dust, noise, what have you, or just the mere the amount of traffic that is actually on the road?
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. So there's a collection of concerns that I would collectively call amenity impacts, and within that is everything you've mentioned. So there's a dust issue, there's traffic on the road, so the volumes of traffic, so that's both vehicular traffic and cycling traffic as well, the behaviour of some of those drivers who are on the road, the noise impact on the adjacent properties. Some of the owners are concerned. They find it challenging to reverse out of their properties onto the road because some of the sight lines are very poor. People are speeding on the road, for example, cyclists as well as road users. So it's a collection of concerns all related to the way in which people are accessing Mystic Park.
Thank you. The other question on that is point 3, the project. Is the project addressing any of the concerns of the petition people?
So the funded project, there were 4 commitments made by ACP to the Australian government through that grant funding agreement. And one of those commitments specifically relates to establishing an alternative access to the park other than Mystic Lane to address the concerns of the residents.
Thank you.
Councillor Keeble.
Thanks, Mayor Nicholas. Director Jeremy, in the petition received, they've got 1, 2, 3. The first one, which is a council ensures the funding for the grant. How much responsibility is that or ACP's in regards to their spending their grant? How much say do we have in the way they spend their grant? I'm just wondering about the feedback back to the group that put in the petition.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. So Council has 0 influence over the spend of that grant. So even though we have 2 representatives on that board, when those representatives are on that board, they are representing the interests of ACP and they have to take their council hat off and they put their ACP hat on. So it's confusing because essentially their council, I'm one of those representatives on the board, but when I sit on that board, I'm not representing council's interest, I'm representing the interests of that board being ACP. So, you know, the answer is council does not have a direct influence over how that money is spent. The only area that council has an interest or an involvement is where ACP proposed to develop some land which is is managed by council. And in this case, one of the options being looked at is White Star Road, which is it's land which is councillor's committee of management over. So that at the moment is looking like one of the preferred alternatives to taking traffic off Mystic Lane. In that case, then council does have an influence because ACP would be seeking the support of council to essentially establish that as the alternative access point.
And thanks. And have the group petitioned ACP then? They've obviously petitioned Alpine Shire. Have they petitioned ACP to have the work done?
So, to my knowledge,
the
the petition has only come to council.
Yep.
So council has shared a copy of the petition with ACP so that they're aware of the communication. Having said that, I know that ACP has been in very regular communication with the resident group. So the ACP is fully aware of the concerns that have been raised by the resident group and trying its best to work through, you know, a process to address those concerns directly.
Okay. And any crystal ball, date when there might be an alternative access road? Like 2 years, 1 year, 6 months?
So the grant funding agreement has a milestone of March 2024 by which the project must be complete.
Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr Jeremy, just one follow-up question there. The ACP's Black Summer Bushfire Recovery Grant of $1.35 million, what's your view on the adequacy of that amount for the scope of works they have planned next to that funding?
So the grant agreement, there were 4 commitments made in the grant agreement. One of the commitments was related to delivery of a flow trail. It didn't specify the length of the trail, the dimensions. So there's a lot of flexibility, I guess, in some of the other bullet points within that commitment that allows ACP to move funds flexibly across those 4 agreements. So I think I'm pretty confident that ACP will be able to deliver. The access road is probably the most specific one, and within the others, they talk about trailhead upgrades and flow trails. They're less specific, and I guess the less specific they are, the less detailed ACP has to be in delivering things into those bullet points. So yeah, reasonably confident.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Jeremy.
Any further comments, questions? No. Take the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Beautiful. To be carried. The next item is 8.1.3, live music event, and it's Mr. Jeremy again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report relates to the award of a contract for a live music event to be held in the Alpine Shire prior to the 31st of January 2023. Following the 2019-20 bushfires, Council secured a cumulative total of $2.3 million of state government funding through the Bushfire Recovery Victoria Council Support Fund. And of that, $180,000 has been allocated towards delivering a live music event. And the objective of this event is to engage and entertain our younger members of the Alpine Shire community, assisting with the recovery from the bushfire event and 2 years of the COVID pandemic. So we've run through a public tender process. We got 8 interested tenderers and we got 3 conforming responses to our tender. We've been through a standard evaluation process and established that the tender from Live Nation best met the requirements of the selection criteria. An exciting part of this report is that we've been approached. There's a new state government organisation called Always Live, and they have been formed to stimulate the music industry following the COVID pandemic by delivering music events throughout Victoria. So Live Nation, who is the recommendation tonight to award the contract to Live Nation, they're a partner of Always Live, and Council has received a proposal from Live Nation, or Always Live through Live Nation, to feature a significant artist. So we're in discussion about what a significant artist is, but essentially they're proposing to piggyback on the back of an event that we're awarding through bushfire funds to deliver something of more significance than we would have otherwise. The details are a bit scant. We're working through the process. As I've noted here, there is a possible condition of that additional engagement that we may have to institute a fee for the access to the event, which we're working through and which we will bring back to Council if that's the case. But at the moment, it's pretty exciting. We're working with them to see what we could deliver for the Alpine Shire community. So recommendation tonight.
Thank you.
Councillor Forsyth has moved and Councillor Hughes has seconded.
I think it's a very exciting event following Katy Perry that we had here 2 years ago now. Sorry, is she coming back? Yeah. Yeah, they might come back. We might get somebody of equivalent to say, well, I've been to the Alpine Shire as well. So I think it's an exciting event, and I pick up on your point to say 180 wouldn't get a really big name artist. However, if the event is ticketed, then the sky's the limit. We could do whatever we wanted to do. I would hate to see, because it is, however, a community-styled event, I would hate to see the ticket prices getting out of hand, that's all. But that's for future considerations. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Mayor. It's another round of bushfire recovery support off the back of unfortunate events, but you know, we've got this opportunity, and I think creating a name for the Alpine Shire as a place where these types of events can be held and held safely and done in a good manner, I think it's a really positive for us. I hope that I still land in the realms of younger members of the Alpine Shire. My question is, it doesn't dictate where in the Alpine Shire this can happen. Is that open for negotiation?
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Yes, that's still up for discussion. So we're, of course, looking at the major towns to see which might be the best match. We're not quite sure yet which weekend the event will be held on, and that to a degree dictates where we can hold it, depending on what other events are on over that weekend as well.
Is that specific time of when it will be held, that's not in our control?
To a degree, yes, but if we follow a partnership with Always Live and they have a significant act who's on a programme, we'll be locked in to the programme that they dictate to us, rather than us being able to dictate to them which weekend they come. Yep. So to a degree, if that's the route we follow, we will be dictated on the timing to a degree.
Thank you.
Councillor Janus.
I just want to follow up on a comment. This is public monies for the benefit of the community, and particularly the young community. And I'd like any committee that's formed to be very cognizant of the fact that the community, the young people in the community who are less fortunate are able to access that event, and so that the cost, if any, and there probably will be, is kept to an absolute minimum, so that the people who want to go, who want to experience that event, can actually afford it. It's just a comment, not a question.
Thank you. Come on, Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think just similar sentiment to Councillor Janus in terms of accessibility for our youth, but also, you know, an event may attract others from outside of area, and we always encourage that. But I think prioritising to ensure that members of our community, our young community that want to be there, that we facilitate, will be pretty important for this event. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments or questions? No, we take the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Lovely. Moving on to item 8.1.4, energy efficient streetlights.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report relates to the award of a contract for the installation of energy efficient street lighting across the Alpine Shire. Upgrading street lighting to improve efficiencies, reduce greenhouse gas emissions and introduce new technology is one of the actions listed in Council's Climate Action Plan. This is the second report we've presented. So the first report we presented was for the purchase of the hardware, which is complete and 99% delivered, and this next one now is for the installation of that hardware. So I won't go through all the details. We've been through a full public tendering process. We've got 8 prospective tenderers and we've got 2 conforming bids, and we've assessed those bids and established that the tender from GPE HV best met the requirements of the selection criteria. One key point to note is the return on investment. So there's a rebate programme that we're trying to access. So excluding any rebates that we get, we're looking at a payback between 4 and 7 years for the project, which is pretty good. But if we're successful in getting the rebates that we think are available to us, then this has a payback programme, payback period, this project of 2 years, which is exceptional. So the recommendation tonight is that Council awards contract for the energy efficient street lighting hardware installation to GPE HV Proprietary Limited, based on the tendered schedule of rates with an upper limiting value of $380,000.
Councillor Janus and Councillor Prime.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, this is a great outcome, I think, for our strategic plan going forward toward our climate action plan as well. It's something, I know it only involves our streetlights at this point in time, and our parks and other open spaces will be evaluated in due course. But this is a great starting point, and I think we will benefit, the community will benefit in not just the 2 years it takes to turn off, but in our environmental outcome for years to come. Thank you.
Councillor Prime.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I completely agree. This slots in perfectly into our climate action plan, which wasn't passed that long ago, September 2021. Improves efficiency, and like Councillor Janus said, yes, it's just the street lighting at this point, but it's a step in the right direction in regards to meeting that climate action plan. So great to see.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
I have two questions. Obviously with these being replaced, there's a level of waste involved. Just wondering what the recycling process would be on the old street lights, please.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. So all the fittings that are removed are disassembled by hand and the materials are separated. And then there's an arrangement in place between GPHV Proprietary Limited and a registered recycler of those materials. GPV receive in return for the materials, they receive certificates certifying that those have been sent to recognised recyclers, and that's part of the rebate process that council's then going to follow to try and secure rebates on the upgraded lighting that we've installed.
Perfect. And in the report, it's noted that not all of the street lights benefit from this changeover, so there's a small shortfall. What would be the reason for that?
If we've already got energy efficient lights that have been installed in recent years,
Okay.
yeah,
Yep,
we wouldn't
thanks.
replace them.
Any further questions or comments? No. Take the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Terrific. Item 8.1.5, Toowoomba Caravan Park roads and the car park construction.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report relates to the award of a contract for the construction of roads and car parking as part of the Toowoomba Caravan Park upgrade project. The scope of the project includes an upgrade to the internal driveway at the entrance to the park and visitor parking. And additionally, due to some in-ground services works that have been completed through the park, there's several of the existing driveways have been trenched and they need to be reinstated. We went out for a full public tender. The tender documents were downloaded by 18 prospective tenderers and we got 4 conforming tenders submitted to council. And we've assessed those tenders and the recommendation is an award to Jackson's Earth Moving, which best met the selection criteria. I've flagged there 2 issues. One is an opportunity. So the delivery methodology incorporates an environmentally sustainable design initiative that's going to try and recycle 500 metres squared of the existing pavement for a use as part of the delivery of the works. So we're hoping that that's going to be successful and we've got a price there in case it's not. And the other thing I've flagged, which is perhaps critical, is we're planning to commence works in early September and for those to be completed by late October. However, and we do have some contingency in that programme. However, if the weather is significantly worse during September and October, then we anticipate then there's a chance that the programme could be pushed out. So these works are on the critical path for the delivery of the project. So that's probably a key point to note. And there's sufficient allocation within the adopted budget for this financial year to deliver the works which are recommended on this contract. So recommendation tonight, council awards contract for Toowoomba Caravan Park roads and car park construction to Jackson's Earth Moving for the lump sum price of $151,627.
Yes, thank you. Get the skates on, Mr Jeremy. Hey?
I beat you.
Why did you beat me? Okay.
I was going to allow age before beauty, but I'll step in. Thank you, Mr Jeremy. For those who don't have an agenda in front of them, everyone's probably been, a lot of Toowoomba people have been closely following the Toowoomba Caravan Park project, and for those who don't have an agenda in front of them, this will include realignment of the park entrance to suit larger vehicles and caravans and provision of a loading waiting bay for check-ins. I think a lot of us would have realised there is a lot of caravans on the road at the moment, and there are some very large caravans on the road at the moment. And someone who's visited a lot of caravans lately, towing something, I also found this can often add in, when you enter a park or leave a park, it often ends in a disagreement between the driver and the back seat driver. So this might be an opportunity to decrease a few of those concerns on someone's holiday and not ruin it. So I'm all for it. And just one question, this shouldn't, at this stage, assuming there's no foreseeable problems, this shouldn't alter the date of the completion of the caravan park.
Thank you, Councillor Prime. So there are 2 factors which are feeding into the opening date for the caravan park. One is the capital project delivery, which is the area that my team's responsible for, and the other part of the process is the tendering and award of a contract to operate the park. So we're still working through the tendering part of the process, and it's only when we have the full results of that tender and we're at a point of awarding that we'll really understand the full picture about when the park will be able to be opened.
Yep. Thank you, Mr Jeremy. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Janus.
I know my place, Madam Mayor. Nothing further.
Any further? Tony Keeble. Councillor Keeble.
Thanks, Mayor Nicholas. I noticed in the issues, actually, I'll go back to the timing. I'm assuming the sealing of the road is weather dependent. So if it stays below, if September is a cold September, then it'll be pushed out, I should imagine. The issues in regards to the environmentally sustainable design involves the recycling of, ex-pavement and reusing pavement. Do you know where that is at, whether we can get that material? Is it available for this job?
So we won't know until we start work.
Yeah.
So essentially we're going to excavate the material and we're going to establish what specification we've achieved and whether it can be reused. And if it can, we'll reuse it. And if it can't, it's not suitable. We haven't achieved
So
the right
that material that's
specification.
currently there, not a stockpile of...
No, this is recycling the material that's in place.
Yeah, no
So
worries.
churning up, digging up what's there,
Yeah, yeah.
establishing whether we can reuse it, and then if we can, we'll reuse it.
And the final seal, will that be a spray seal? Will it be a hot mix seal so I can roller skate on it?
A spray seal at this stage.
Spray seal, no worries. Thank you.
Further questions, comments? Take that one to the vote. All those in favour? Beautiful. Carried. Thank you, Mr Jeremy, for your input tonight.
If I could, Madam Mayor, could I acknowledge the attendance of my father-in-law, who's travelled from South
Absolutely.
Africa for holiday, and he's deemed it important enough to come along to a council meeting to participate, and also my brother-in-law as well, who's travelled not so far. He's come from the Kiewa Valley. So thank you for showing an interest in our democracy.
Absolutely, thank you. Yep. Thank you, Mr Jeremy, and the attendees. Our next presenter is Director of Corporate Performance, Ms Havercroft, and we're up to item 8.2.1, Instruments of Appointment and Authorisation, Planning and Environment Act 1987.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is a short report to make some changes to the delegations that we have. So we've got a newly appointed Senior Statutory Planning Officer, and our Manager for Planning and Amenity has gone on parental leave, so we have an acting Manager for Planning and Amenity who needs to have the correct delegation. So the report today sets out which delegations need to be changed and which would need to be revoked as a result of the new Senior Statutory Planning Officer coming into post. So the recommend...
Business as read. Thank you, Mayor.
No, nothing from me.
Any comment, questions? We'll put the motion to the vote. Recommendation. All those in favour? Carried, thank you. 8.2.2. Risk Management Policy and Governance and Risk Framework Review.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the purpose of this report is to present the 2022 review of Council's Risk Management Policy number 54 and the Governance and Risk Framework which falls underneath it. The last review was conducted in 2019 and this review brings into place the new council plan and sets out some small changes to the policy to cover off our council plan, and also there's been some new standards that have been introduced, so we've changed just the terminology and the language that's in the risk policy to reflect that. The more broad changes and the review have taken place in the governance and risk framework, where we've changed the layout to cover off governance, compliance and risk. And in all of those areas, we've again brought it up to date for new legislation, but we've also carried out a little bit of work in the risk framework relating to our risk appetite and how that would then play through into our risk register. The piece of work relating to the risk register itself hasn't been undertaken yet. That's subject to getting approval to the new risk policy and the framework. But the idea being that we set out more clearly for our councillors and our officers how our appetite to certain activities in our risk register will be applied and what mitigations would we expect from our teams therein. So this evening, the recommendation is that Council notes the review of the risk management policy has been completed and takes in the modifications that are set out in the recommendation. It adopts and thereby revokes the Alpine Council risk management policy. It signs and seals the risk management policy at the appropriate time of the meeting, and it notes our review of the governance and risk framework that's been undertaken.
Moved by Councillor Kelly. Seconded by Councillor Forsyth. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms Havercroft, my remarks on this one, I think there's some good maturity around the framework and the updated policy. And I did want to just single out the responsible officers and also the independent members of the Audit and Risk Management Committee for their contribution. Couple of things, or probably one. You mentioned the work's to be done yet in terms of reviewing our register in line with the updated framework. At a high level, do you anticipate any of our current, any of the current risks on our register materially changing that will require addressing in the near term?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. We went through a process probably about 4 months ago to have a look at our risk register in some detail in preparation for an Audit and Risk Committee meeting. And during that, there was some movement from high to medium. And that was as an approach to seeing what the risk appetite work might look like as we work through it. We haven't cemented that or really communicated it back out to our teams. So it's hard for me to judge whether any of the risks will materially change. There might be some movement between medium and high, I imagine. I'm foreseeing, though, that the conversations will be much more around, have we identified the correct risk, or have we identified a problem which isn't the risk, and we need to work out what that really what the risk is and how we intend to take steps to mitigate it based on what our appetite, what we've said our appetite for that risk is going to be, rather than material movements. A new risk was brought onto our strategic risk register as a result of that piece of review work 4 months ago, and that was climate change risk. And we haven't done an evolved piece of work about what the mitigations for us are in that space. So that risk might change as we work through the process.
Great. Thanks, Ms Hazelcott.
John Forsyth.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of points. One is that risk in an organisation is an organisational responsibility. Just simply passing this, the framework review and what have you, doesn't necessarily mean that the organisation is aware of risk. Is there anywhere in the documents that says that you are putting in training to a manager level, to a worker level, whereby they will be able to recognise a risk if they actually see one?
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. Training isn't specifically identified in the framework, but the risk officer we have has set out what the training is going to look like. And part of that is that we've strengthened who the responsible officer will be for the risks. It was kind of dependent on who had placed that risk within the risk register before, but now depending on the level of that risk, it depends whether it would be at director level, or officer level, or chief executive level. And the next stage of reviewing those risks will be with that responsible officer, so back out into the team so that people have an understanding of how it will work on the ground. The risk officer is also collating where we have our risk register. We've got them in all sorts of places. The matrix is set out in our projects work, in the corporate risk register. So there's a piece of work to gather all of that and update it collectively, and part of that process will be saying what the changes are and why.
Thank you. Got a follow-up as well. Pardon me, and we've got this thing in front of us here. Yeah, we'll shift it. Over the last couple of years, we have noted at Council that the appetite for risk is getting tighter and tighter. The risks identified by either a general public or the various authorities have become very tight, and people are seeing more risk. They're seeing risk whenever they turn around. How often is this policy actually reviewed? Has it got a review process? Is it 2 yearly, 4 yearly? And if that is the case, does the risk framework get reviewed at the same time?
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. The risk policy itself is on a 2-year review process. The framework has had quite a deep look this time. I'm not anticipating that that would be looked at necessarily in 2 years' time, but our risk register itself is to be looked at on at least a 6-monthly basis by the executive team.
If there's no more comments or questions, we'll take the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? It'll be carried. The next item is 8.2.3, Audit and Risk Committee meeting minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report is for Council to note the Audit and Risk Committee meetings number 2021/22-5 that was held on the 20th of May 2022. The principal piece of business at that meeting related to a discussion around our management of our road assets, and that report is attached to the agenda this evening. Other than that, there is little to report. So the recommendation is that Council receives and notes the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting on the 20th of May 2022.
No comments.
Councillor Hughes. Any comments or questions? I'll take the recommendation to the vote that we note the minutes. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 8.2.4, our insurance portfolio for the 22-23 financial year.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report seeks council approval for the purchase of the recommended insurance policies and membership of mutuals and discretionary trust arrangements. Broadly, this is the insurances across all of council for the forthcoming year. It's important to note that we're at the 5th of July and these had to be in place on the 1st of July. So whilst the report comes with a recommendation for approval, we are insured right now and have signed off on these insurances for the purposes of good governance. A question was raised earlier by a councillor about where our buildings are covered. And our buildings are covered in the Municipal Asset Protection Plan Discretionary Trust Arrangement, JMAP, just for confirmation and clarification. There is a range of insurances in here. The total comes to over £332,000 and is broken down dollars. I apologise, sorry. Slip of the tongue. I'm dreaming of warmer places. And it's broken down, as you might imagine, between our assets and our people and protecting our people. So the recommendation this evening is that council awards the insurances that we sign up to those insurances as listed.
Moved Councillor Kelly, seconded Councillor Keeble.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms Havercroft, just building on from our risk profile and discussion around risk, a couple of questions. Does our approach to insurance and our levels of insurance, are they kind of gelled with our risk register and our risk profile as an organisation? Is there any discretion on how we engage in that?
I might have to take, thank you, Councillor Kelly, I might have to take the specifics of that question on notice, but the detail that is required relating to our insurances, I can comment, has gone up enormously. So I think to reflect the risk, insurance companies are asking for significantly more details about our business and our assets than they have in previous years. So they may be becoming more risk averse about what and how they insure. And we've seen an increase in our premiums. It wasn't as high as we'd been anticipating, but we have seen quite an increase in our premiums over the 21-22 period.
Thank you. And Ms Havercroft, just following on from that, so there's sort of $800,000+ in premiums here, if I'm reading it correctly, across the categories. Is there any benchmarking available to say, well, as an organisation of this size in local government, you know, and as a percentage of our outgoings in operational expenditure, how this amount sits? Is there any sort of benchmarking available on Know Your Council? Do you know?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. There isn't on Know Your Council, and I would have to take it on notice and ask our risk officer who arranges our insurance of whether there is comparators across the regional local councils. But the work that she's done is being done given the groups that we use and so we use MAV,
Yeah.
they're providing insurance across the regional council network, so we'll
Maybe
be
they
in
can
the
give
same
us
place as
insight.
them.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Just a quick question from me. The commercial crime insurance, did you mention that before, what the figure was?
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. So in the agenda this evening, we didn't have the amount for the commercial crime insurance at the point that the agenda was published. In the minutes, it will show that that piece of insurance was $4,447.56. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
In relation to the premiums, you're saying that they've been increased. Do you think that has any reflection on the fact that we've been a bushfire affected area? And if so, is there anything that has come off the back of being a bushfire affected area that has actually removed insurance that we would normally be covered for?
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. The commentary that I received from the Risk Officer, it wasn't related to our bushfire. I know that there was some issues with insurances more broadly relating to bushfire-prone areas, but that hasn't been one of the things that has thrown up our premium in this space.
Thank you. Any further? Thank you, Councillor Janus.
We've sought this through the MAV, Municipal Associations Victoria, correct?
Thank you, Councillor Janus. Yes, we've got a broker who works for us to find us the best prices for our insurance, and we work through MAV for some of the insurances as listed in the recommendation.
Yeah, so my understanding of services that the MAV provide is that one of the reasons the MAV was set up was to provide insurance to local government way back when it's legislated. And because of all 79 councils are members of the MAV insurance scheme, we are able to procure a better price from our insurers who come from international sources. So, yeah, just a little plug for the MAV.
Thank you, Councillor Janus. Any further comment or questions? Take it to the vote. Recommendation tonight. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. The next item is the Bright Western Gateway Development Plan, and I'm not going to read out all the numbers. Item 8.2.5.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So this report is intended to set out the contextual background and assessment of compliance with the requirements of the Alpine Planning Scheme, and more precisely the Development Plan Overlay Schedule 3 in relation to part of the Bright Western Gateway development. So this report covers a part of the Bright Western Gateway and is being termed the Bright Western Gateway Development Plan. And it's version 6, June 2022. And the reason for the report is to inform councillors' decision-making this evening. So the proposal is that the development plan that was appended to the agenda, which is the Bright Western Gateway Development Plan, version 6, June 2022, has been brought for consideration this evening as a result of quite a long planning history. So in 2005, the subject site, along with the land on the northern side of the Great Alpine Road, was identified through the Alpine Residential Land Review as the preferred area for urban growth in Bright in order to facilitate additional residential development. The rezoning of the land from farming zone to general residential zone was facilitated through the Alpine Planning Scheme Amendment C34 that was gazetted in August 2015. This amendment also applied Schedule 3 to the development plan, the land subject to inundation, and made the site subject to a bushfire management overlay. It's an assessment against these constraints that planning officers have undertaken to support their recommendations this evening. I think it's really worth noting that there was no public consultation as a result of this development plan coming before council this evening, and I know that that's been the subject of concern, and that last Saturday some councillors took part in an open drop-in session at the library to hear people's concerns relating to the site. That none of the outcomes from that are reflected in this report, but that's part of the consultation, hopefully, that as we move forward. So the 2015 proposed planning scheme amendment was subject to public exhibition, there was a consultation process and a planning panel would have been convened to enable the Minister to make a decision about the amendment C34, but no subsequent consultation has taken place. In the development plan overlay and in the agenda, the consultation asks specifically that we go to the CFA and ask their views, which we did, and the appendix to the agenda has the CFA response. The development plan is not expected to provide more than a high-level concept detail. The detailed design will still be required for areas such as drainage, highway and landscaping. This detailed design is determined at the planning permit stage once a development plan has been applied to the site.
Moved, Councillor Janis. Seconded, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Janis.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been ongoing since 2015, we know that. I was on council at the time. This proposal before council, although when we read the recommendation, it's very difficult to understand, and I wish it could have been simplified a little more particularly for the public to understand. But this is just generally for an overlay. There's no real detail involved in this plan per se, as how many houses there's going to be, the size of the streets or anything like that. This is at a later stage. This is at a higher level than that, and those other intricacies come at a later stage where my understanding is that there will be further opportunity for public consultation. But we have to start somewhere with this, and I note that our planners, one of them is present tonight, so have worked tirelessly with the developers in a consultative way to get to the result where we are at the moment. So there's just so much has gone on behind the scenes to get to this point as it is, and I thank my fellow councillors who attended on Saturday to listen to the public and their concerns, and two of our senior staff as well for that, and the feedback has been given to those to us other councillors. But I suppose the bottom line is really that there are further processes to take place before we even see any sort of outhouse even on that area. So, yep, it's still going to take some time to go through the processes there, and there'll be a lot of work needed to be done in consultation with the developers and all their representatives. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Janis. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to also acknowledge the significant amount of work that's been required by council officers to get this to the July council meeting. It's fair to say this is probably the biggest residential development proposed in the Alpine Shire, and certainly I understand it to be 10 times larger than anything that any residential development in or around Bright. There's a lot of aspects to this to consider, and I'm sure some of my other colleagues here tonight will reflect those. There are two things I wanted to address. And the first one is around the risk profile of the site and our changing climate. Obviously, the CFA have been sought for their views on this development, and I think my reading of that is there's a lot of work yet to be done. And my understanding is, and Ms Hadforcroft, please correct me if I'm wrong, it's actually the next stage when the developer proposes some subdivisions that the CFA will be re-engaged to provide a more definitive view. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. So at the next stage, the applicant will have to put in a bushfire assessment and their plan, and then that will be assessed by the CFA. So the notation that sits within the development plan itself stipulates that the CFA will in essence assess the bushfire assessment that's carried out by the applicant itself, so providing the assessment that's required.
Great, thank you. Because, my surveying of that, at least our Alpine Shire, this is the most significant residential development next to commercial forestry that I've identified in my bike rides and other activities, which sort of builds on to the second point I wanted to flag today, and that is that there is a pre-existing long-term commercial forestry operator. And when I think about HVP's operations, that's a significant activity in our Shire. Yes, there are jobs out of this, and it's not just the jobs on the land, it's all the maintenance and all the other work that the commercial forestry brings, as well as, providing an important product for the domestic Australian market. The Alpine Community Plantation has been a fantastic piece of innovation that the commercial forestry operator has contributed to there. And I think when I look at the size of this development and its potential in our Shire, I'd really encourage the proponents to look pretty carefully at those kind of innovative partnerships and opportunities, because, the community plantation, has brought a lot of tourism. It's been a great recreational opportunity for our residents. And when I look at this development partnering with other opportunities, I think there's an incredible opportunity, not just because it's the next door neighbour, so to speak, to the commercial forestry. With that, that's my view.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Hughes.
The public consultation process that we went through on Saturday, it was really good to be able to sit down in front of people and have a chat. I think the fear of the unknown is what a lot of people need answers to, and to be able to know that they're being able to get those answers and the answers are correct, because newspapers, articles, radio and things like that, they aren't always necessarily putting out all of the information or correct information. There's been lot sizes thrown out, there's been number of houses thrown out, and we're not at that point yet. I think a lot of people are dwelling on the decision that was made back in 2016 to be able to turn this into a residential lot to allow for a development. And I think instead of looking at the past and holding that grudge, we need to look at the present and the future of this site. And I think council staff that have been involved in this process have done an impeccable job with keeping to what it is that Bright has to offer. Looking at what it is we're actually making a decision on today, it's the June 2022 development plan. And it is already out there and known that, if we're to say and approve that June plan today, that, we're going to be going to the applicants to withdraw the VCAT application, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms Habercroft, if that would be noted for the November plan, which is different to the one that we've put forward now. Is that correct?
So the recommendation this evening is that you approve the June 22 plan. The November 2021 plan is significantly different, and the council officers would suggest is not compliant. But that is the case that the applicant, that's the development plan that the applicant would take to VCAT, so that we would be then having a different conversation about the grounds for refusing that and taking those grounds to VCAT.
Thank you. So it's just going to show that work has been done on it. They haven't slapped something in front of us and gone, this is what we're doing. So it is a big process, and I can understand certain frustrations behind what people are wanting to see in terms of community consultation, but we're just not quite there yet. This is the start of something bigger. And if we can get these things done properly now, then that's, paving the future for something that people can be involved in and have their voice heard and things like that. I think, from the conversations we've had with the developers as well, they're not wanting to see something that doesn't fit with Bright either. They've got a reputation to uphold as well. They are developers, they are putting up an entire estate here, and we need to be mindful of that too. They're not going to sit there and give away things because that's what people feel that needs to happen with, think people have thrown out, is this going to be helping with affordable housing and things like that? Well, unfortunately, Bright is not affordable. It is known the affordable housing side of things is being looked at in different avenues through council and other ways, but this is solely what it is looking at the external features of this development plan to then move forward. But nothing can move forward until Alpine Shire Council, as the approval authority, actually deems that it's been done properly as well. So it is a stepped process. Please be patient, but also be mindful, like, we all want to have a chat with you too. If you've got questions or you've got fear of the unknown, then we want to help you get those answers. And one of those spots to get those answers is through the council website. There is a link. And it will be updated regularly as we move through this process.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Forsyth.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I think this is a very exciting project, and I think our vote tonight, basically gives surety to our planning officers to engage with the applicants so that they've got some sense that council is actually behind them in their deliberations with the developers to get the best outcome for all of us, not just them, but the residents and also council. So, exciting project. Keep going.
Councillor Prime.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm with Councillor Forsyth on this. I think this is incredibly exciting, and I'll just reiterate what the other councillors said tonight. There's been an enormous amount of work gone into this. Ms Havercroft, I see 2 officers here tonight as well who've had to explain lots of things to us councillors, go over and over it and be very patient with us, and I really appreciate the time they've put into it, so we've got a really good understanding of what's going on, so then we can actually feed back to the community because we've got a good idea of what's going on. And again, like everyone else has said tonight, it's a very high overarching plan of what's going on. No, block sizes or number of blocks yet. So if anyone is watching this at home tonight, and we know the speculation has been quite rife in the community about various aspects of this, if you are seeing this, you've got the facts here. You can refer people back to this and seek clarification on that. So just so everyone's got a good idea of what's going on, and a very exciting development for Bright to come.
Thank you. Councillor Keeble.
Thanks. Madam Mayor, thank you. This particular development plan, they don't usually come to council. There's been commentary over the last journey about, council not being transparent on this, but it's not about that, because usually development plans don't come to council. It's when it gets to that subdivision stage and there's other, runs on the board and tar on the ground or whatever you want to say. So this is council being transparent to the Shire, to the local community and the whole Shire that this is happening. And so, the information's there in this particular document. I see the press are here. They'll, put in the papers what they will in regards to this development, and, all the information's here. So that's all I really wanted to say. And I do thank our fellow councillors who went on the weekend. Thank you, and officers.
Thank you, councillors. All I do have a question. It's a question that's come in through a member of the public who is interested about whether council could impose a 173 agreement across the land at this point in time as part of the development plan that would do something like identify lot sizes or establish a landscaping plan or make things a bit more solid into the future. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there is a requirement in DPO3 that there is a section 173, but it relates to the plantation land and the noise and dust that might create, so from a residential perspective. But otherwise, section 173 agreements are by agreement, and so we don't have any ability to force somebody to sign a section 173 on that basis. So whilst we might ask, we might not get.
Thank you. Right of reply, Councillor Janus.
Love technology. I just want to point out as well on that, so I've asked for that plan to be put up onto the screen there, that on the southeast section, so the bluish section at the back there, the original developer made a significant concession with HVP to push back the boundaries of that development for the purpose of, and that was in consultation with CFA at the time, the rules at the time, to ensure that there was some level of protection against bushfire. And I know that things have changed a little since then with the CFA regulations and building and that, but I think it needs to be pointed out that the original proponent on this land did make a number of concessions in that first instance for public safety, and it's how we work through that going forward. It will be another issue on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Janus. So we are ready to take this recommendation to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation as read? Thank you. It'll be unanimous. We will move on to planning application to 8.2.6, which Councillor Hughes has a conflict on, and while Councillor Hughes is leaving the room at, what time it is, 6:28, I just wanted to say, because I meant to earlier at the meeting, that we will have a confidential item at item 15, so we will close the meeting after item 14 and ask people to leave the room so we can continue with the confidential item. Okay, item 8.2.6, Ms Hevercroft.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a planning application at 7 Growlers Creek, Wandillagong. It is an application for building and works from the construction of a dwelling and an outbuilding on a piece of land zoned low-density residential. The proposal is to construct a new house. It's a single-storey dwelling, and it has its associated wastewater disposal area within the grounds. There's also a detached outbuilding proposed as a workshop. The site has a total area of 2,032 square metres. When it went out to public consultation, it attracted 2 objections that were maintained. They are summarised in 12 specific points. As is normal, the objections were shared with the applicant, who was given an opportunity to come back with some comments. And then the assessor in your report sets out the pertinent issues that relate to this site. The principal point to note is that an Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Management Plan was not required for this proposal. Separate legislation exists outside of the Planning and Environment Act, which would include specific controls around native title artefacts, should any be identified on the site during construction. That was one of the objections and concerns from the site. So the recommendation before you this evening is the approval to grant a planning permit be issued for the construction of a dwelling and outbuilding in accordance with the conditions outlined in 8.2.6a, and because it's generally in accordance with the framework and overlays that sit on the site.
Moved, Councillor Janus. Seconded, Councillor Janus.
Thank you. I think other than the heritage overlay, and that's something that comes up a number of times in the Wandillagong region, they are guidelines, and it has been addressed by our staff or consultant in this area, and I see no reason why this new building doesn't comply in the whole scheme of things. Look, I understand that people have their preferences, the way buildings should be built and where they're placed on the block, but knowing the site, I see no reason to reject this application.
Councillor Prime.
Thought I was going to have issues then. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I appreciate the work that's gone into this, and as Councillor Janus said, I understand why people object, and you absolutely have the right to object, and I think that's a good thing. You should be able to question things. I'm fine. I think, as stated here by the officers, the proposal generally meets the relevant provisions, and particularly the heritage overlay one can be a little bit of a tricky one, especially out in that area of the Alpine Shire. But to me, this meets everything well, and I don't see any reason why it can't go ahead.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions on this recommendation? No. Take it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Thank you. Carried. We have, yep, thank you. We'll just have Councillor Hughes returning to the room at 6:33. Thank you. And we are moving on to item 8.2.7, amendment to planning application 650 Buffalo River Road, Buffalo River.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is a planning permit for 650 Buffalo River Road. It is an amendment to a planning permit that was issued in 2019. And the proposal here is threefold. They would like the addition of 3 10,000-litre rainwater tanks. They would like to make minor increases to the height of the sea containers, and they would like the deletion of the conditions relating to landscaping. So an application came before Council in February 2022, and I make that point to mark that that's not up for discussion this evening. That is an application for a dwelling which was refused at the ordinary council meeting. This is an amendment to just the sea containers at the back of their land, rather than any consideration of a dwelling. So the corrected planning permit was issued on the 20th of April 2020 for the development of agricultural sea containers and greenhouses. Those 3 changes are the amendments that are before you this evening. So the site is over 3,000 square metres. Most of the surrounding smaller sites are developed for the purpose of single dwellings, and the larger lots being used for agricultural purposes. It sits within the farming zone, so the application for the agricultural purpose is not in dispute. The officer's recommendation this evening is that permission for the amendments is granted, but that the conditions to remove the landscaping aren't removed. So the conditions would stay with the landscaping conditions contained within it.
Moved, Councillor Forsyth. Second, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you, Mayor. The initial application for this particular piece of land had quite a few requirements and conditions on it. None of those other conditions have been changed.
So the conditions that applied at the beginning stay with this amended application. There was a correction to the amendment done on the 20th of April 2020, but those conditions are separately identified in the conditions contained in this report.
Good.
But then there's no removal of conditions. There was a request, I believe, just today to remove conditions 1, B and C, but there's no change to the recommendation or the conditions contained in this report that you're deciding this evening.
So when the recommendation goes back out with disapproval, it will be just annotated to the original conditions. Is this correct?
Yep, the conditions are set out in the agenda, and they broadly don't remove the landscaping conditions.
Exactly. Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms Havercroft, how do you raise a shipping container extension of height?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. I don't know. So the application is to... Mr Jeremy will know. Probably not. So the application is to change the height by 300 millimetres to allow the water tanks to be placed in the right place and for their awning to have the right angle. How they go about that, I can't answer, sorry.
I think
Oh, go on.
I think point 2 there is that it's actually just reflecting what currently exists. I don't think they're raising it. Is that what I read? Minor increases in the heights of the sea containers on the site to reflect what currently exists on the site. So does that mean the height was just wrong? They're just currently reflecting it?
Thank you, Councillor Keeble.
I'm just wondering if that's the case.
The amended plans are to bring into existence what exists on the site, the request is.
I had the same question too.
Thank you.
Thank you. You clear now? Yep. Councillor Forsyth knew the answer. He was going to come up with it too.
It's quite easy. There is some MDF large beams, which are 300. You put them in underneath, basically. That's how you do it.
Further questions, comments? No. Take this one to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation tonight? Carried. Okay. Our next item is informal meetings of councillors. It's moved by Councillor Hughes, seconded by Councillor Forsyth. All those in favour? Next item is presentation of reports by delegates, and this section, for those who don't already know, is for councillors who are representative on various committees and activities across the state get to report back to us and the public. So I'll just start on my left and ask if Councillor Keeble has anything.
Number 10 presentation or general business?
No, number 10.
Number 10. That's no. Councillor Forsyth.
Look, a very quick presentation. I am the representative for Alpine Shire at the MAV. As Councillor Janice mentioned earlier, it's the Municipal Association of Victoria. They had a state council just recently. At the state council, there has been a push for the last 12 months to change some of the rules, which is bringing it up to date for a dynamic organisation, the dynamic organisation that it is. Some of those rules affected us considerably. One in particular is the abolition of plural voting. Just to explain that a little bit more, some of the councils in Victoria at State Council get 2 votes, whilst other councils only get 1. In the past, it has been basically the metropolitan larger councils that have had 2 votes and the rural councils get 1. So in some instances, you may find or you may see that there is a disproportionate vote and it will favour one side, not the other. It was a very strong recommendation that plural voting be abolished, and I'd like to say that the recommendation to abolish it was passed 64% to 36% on the day. That includes getting some of the councils that have got 2 votes voting for it as well. Now that goes to the next state council after the lawyers have had a good look at it and actually created the correct policy and the correct wording. So that was a very good win. The other amendments were that there is a specific period of time that the president for the MAV will be elected for, and if a council decides to try and white ant that particular person who is the representative of that council, which has happened in the past, it cannot happen anymore. So the president will stay in place. There was a whole 90 motions passed on the day. A lot of them were basically metrocentric. However, it was a very interesting day, and I'm glad that the rules changes are coming up to the next State Council, which is in September, and fingers crossed everything will get passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth, and thank you very much for taking on that role. Councillor Prime, no? Councillor Dennis? Yes. Yep.
We've got a tech man in there. He is. On the 21st of June this year, of course, I went to the Savoy Club as part of my role with the Resilience Committee to listen to Martin Heppel, who ran a series for young people, particularly school children, and it was resilience. And so it was a really entertaining evening, and I think there was probably at least 120 present, and it was just teaching the children about being resilient in their lives, and there were a number of parents present as well, primary school, but predominantly secondary school, where it's been. And the message actually I took back from that was that kids just want to be heard. So, and then that sort of brought me back to the days when we had youth council and children, young people having the ability to speak to councillors and have their voices heard. And that didn't happen. It hasn't happened for a while because of a number of reasons, but predominantly the size of our shire and getting young people from point A to point B. But I think in some point in the future, it's something we should consider revisiting, perhaps in a more modern form than actually hopping in a car and driving around. But I'm sure with IT capabilities these days and being able to get around, and maybe it's up to councillors to get out and see the kids too, at certain times of the year when we go perhaps to Mount Beauty for a visit, start a bit earlier and get there at school finish time so young people can have a chat to us about their concerns. But it was a very worthwhile evening, and it is part of our resilience for our youth. And the other meeting I went to, which was online, which was our L2P program, and this, I believe, is also part of resilient youth in our community, because they need that opportunity to be able to drive motor cars, have good mentors for people to teach them how to drive. There is a lack of mentors that we have, and there's a call for people who think that they can provide that service to step forward through the community, come through the council here. L2P is very well respected by Vic Roads, who fund it. We're one of the fewer councils that actually meet the criteria and the expectations. So I would ask if there's anybody out there that could assist and give up a little bit of time to help the young people, because, as I said at that meeting, our public transport is rubbish. And, even from the bus was 20 minutes late getting from Bright to Myrtleford the other morning. So, people are wondering what's going on, and then you miss connections. But, people need their licence. Young people need their licence to get the job interviews and things. And if we can help them to do that, that's a more resilient community for us. So they're the two things I went to.
And I can't use my microphone either. Next item is general business, and I will start with you, Councillor Janice. While you've got the mic.
I just, I've lost my page. I forgot, we had an award in our council, in our shire the other day, and it was in the local newspaper. It was the Australian Rural Business Awards, and Alchemy in Myrtleford, a young person's clothing shop.
Young person.
Maybe young and smaller people, won the Young Rural Business of the Year award. So I congratulate them, and it was a young former employee who took over that business and has grown it on. So congratulations to them. So no other general business.
Thank you. Councillor Prime.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge that quite a few of us, I think nearly all of us, were lucky to see Dylan Alcott earlier in the month. And we did a fantastic job. I think we secured him before he was actually Australian of the Year, I have a feeling. So we knew him of tennis fame before then, and just an all-round good guy. And I was lucky enough to tag along to at the community centre here, where he spoke to local school children from over here in the Ovens, and he was fantastic. Speaking of resilience, Dylan talked about how he was pretty badly bullied during primary school and high school and barely left the house for 2 years because of a lot of that. So you'd feel like a bit of a sucker now if that was you who'd done that to him at school. So he was just terrific, and the way he spoke to the kids and just said they could throw any words around on the day, and he was just such a fantastic person to get out for an event like that. So that was well done that we got him here. And I wish him all the best in his retirement at the age of 30, 31, 32. So I think he's worked hard enough in his life to deserve that. So that was fantastic by the Alpine Shire to get him.
I don't think he's retired. He's retired from sport,
Yeah,
but he's working very hard.
Yeah, I didn't realise he was a basketball Olympian prior to being a Paralympian before tennis, yeah. So some people are just very good at what they do.
Absolutely. Nothing from Councillor Forsyth. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Yes, the Dylan Alcott thing was absolutely marvellous, and what I think I took out of that the most was the questions that I've actually got from some of the younger people in our Alpine Shire. One of the things that Dylan raised was disabled's not a dirty word. It's not a bad word. It is what it is, and we shouldn't shy away from using it. And it has actually sparked some really good conversation with the younger generations, because it was grade 5, I think it was grade 5 and up to year 12. I've been approached and asked a few questions about accessibility here within the Alpine Shire. So to be able to spark a conversation with a grade 5 student, it's actually really wonderful. And kind of going off what Councillor Janice has said with the Youth Council, I was a youth councillor back in my day. I was lucky enough to be on the Youth Council, and it is a fantastic opportunity. So if it's something that, you know, we can get the kids involved in, I know of a good handful of students that would be willing to put their hand up already and really get involved in something like that. For me, I mentioned earlier in the congratulations about the volunteer groups and the outgoing and incoming presidents of those groups. But it's not just the Rotary and the Lions that are shouting out for volunteers. The Bright Lions Club started off with 57 and they're down to 16 members. And so what the conversation we had the other night was, where are we lacking in that communication piece to be able to get new members, to be able to put their hand up and jump on these committees. Even committees of management like the art gallery and things like that, they're all volunteer positions, and without them our communities don't run, and I don't think that we really grasp the magnitude of what it is that they have to offer. So if anybody has any ideas about how we can change that communication piece and to be able to get more people to put their hand up and say yes, you know, I would welcome that feedback and those discussions to really start driving some of the passion that I know that we live in such a fast-paced time, and sometimes we just need to slow down and realise what it is that makes the wheels turn. So if we can open up the communication and find out what it is that's might be hindering that process of getting new volunteers, then we can look at some good positive change. And the other thing I think that I've heard most about, and it's probably around, obviously we've had lots of discussions about the Gateway project and other bits and pieces and community consultation. And a lot of the time people always put their hand up and go, I didn't hear about that and I would have been interested. There's avenues of social media, there's avenues of the website, newspaper, local radio, general word of mouth, sometimes even to the point of emailing those that, have expressed interest in the past. If you don't keep a close eye on what is happening, you will miss things and you will lose an opportunity. And this is where I'm really putting it out there to people is, just flick through, have a look, read about it, because what other avenues are there for community consultation apart from walking around to every household and knocking on a door? So although look, there's things that, I was here and around back in 2015 when the land was rezoned for development. I just had my third child. I was in the Alpine Shire. I knew nothing about it. So I'm one to put my hand up straight away and say that these things get missed. But if we don't keep an eye on it, we will miss it and we'll miss our chance. And there's no point kicking up a stink on something that is kind of out of the control when all avenues have been explored. So unless someone can come up with another idea of an easier and more effective way of getting the information out other than the avenues we already have, then we're all ears. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to raise, we've spoken a little bit about the younger folk that are part of our community, and it was terrific to have some children from Myrtleford P12 here in the council chambers a few weeks back, and whilst we had some confusion as to who our newly elected Prime Minister might be, everyone knew who the Mayor was. But
I'm trying to introduce myself.
But it was terrific to have children up running through a process and running through that democratic process of decision making on a project. And I guess I would call out that, organisations don't hesitate to reach out and work your councillors hard, because I think opportunities like that are great for our young folk. But similarly, other ways that people can experience what council is about and also form a view on what's important to them as they do these things is really important. So I look forward to the next opportunity like that and many more, because I had a lot of fun, but the children clearly had a lot of fun, a lot of good questions, and thank you to the teachers at Myrtleford P12. They clearly prepped their students really well, and it was a really engaging morning. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Keeble.
Thank you, Mayor Nicholas. Just wanted to let everyone know that if they don't know, that the North East Water Community and Key Stakeholder Reference Group for the Mount Beauty Raw Water Offtake Project has now concluded their work. As in, they've had, I think, what did they have? 5 group meetings, 2 technical meetings, some site visits. And the board, North East Water Board, will be meeting and going on sites and then coming up with a decision at some stage and then letting the community know. I don't know the timeline of that decision, whether it's within the month. July 25th, there we go. So July 25th, there will be some decision and that decision will be communicated to the stakeholder group to start with, I should imagine, and go from there. So looking forward to that. Thank you for all the people in the community who actually were part of that group, put their hands up. And for Councillor Kelly also put a hand up. It's been hard to meet some of the meetings with all the things that are going on, but thanks to everyone else who was part of those conversations. My last one is the walking trail, walking trail from the extension of the, what do we call it now, not Pebble Beach? Kerry Village, right, thank you, Kerry River Trail. I've got a few names in there. Where's that at? I've seen that there's some clearing going on in regards to getting it up to Downs Road. Just want to know where we're at.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. So we're waiting for a decision on the funding application at the moment. So the works that you've seen done were, I guess, opportunistic works. We had a bit of funding from the scoping project that we did that was available to allow us to essentially start clearing and looking at where the best alignment would be for that trail. So those are the works that you saw. But in order to deliver the project, we need a successful outcome for our funding application.
Wonderful, thank you. And then the last one. People in the Kerry Valley, in Mount Beauty in particular, would see the earthworks going on for the new pump track. So you would see that some of that earthworks is starting, is happening now.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. A couple of things to me. I did mention NAIDOC Week earlier in the council meeting. I just wanted to talk about it a little bit more. It goes from the 3rd to the 10th of July, and it's recognition and celebration of the history and culture of our First Peoples, as well as achievements. And I just wanted to point out that it's really important to recognise that at all times, not just during this week, this is a way to recognise that happens, and then we can continue it on. But I also wanted to point out that it's the 50th year since the Tent Embassy was established in Canberra, and 30 years since the Mabo decision. So it's pretty important for our First Peoples and their hopes for the future. I also wanted to pick up the young people civics tour, because it was a lot of fun. They play acted and came up and stood up here and wanted to bang the hammer and had a wonderful time. So they were grades 3 and 4, and the day before I'd gone to speak to grades 5 and 6 at St Mary's in Myrtleford, and it was an incredibly engaged and informed group of young people, and I think it's a really good start to bring them into the democratic process, a fabulous civics part of their curriculum that's about civics. But also just wanted to ask our hardworking staff about what we're doing. We have a youth engagement plan. Is that something along those lines in train? And just some quick feedback on that.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. So we're very close to finalising the youth strategy, and we intend to go out to public consultation on that draft in the August Council meeting to allow the community the opportunity to have a look at that. So there's already been engagement with the youth group, so this is really the final product going out to the community to tell us whether we've got it right or not.
How hard to use at this time of night or something. Thank you. That's wonderful news. That's all from me in general business. Item 12 is motions for which notice has previously been given, and there are none. 13, reception and reading of petitions. There are none. We have documents for sealing. Moved by Councillor Forsyth and seconded by Councillor Kelly. Prime. Oh, I did. Councillor Kelly, Prime. I did almost see the end. Thank you. And all those in favour? Carried. Thank you. And that is, now we'll close the public section of the council meeting. Thank you very much for people who've attended tonight. And really appreciate having some gallery and some questions. And I close the public component.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So I would like to get Councillor Forsyth has moved that we go into.
Second.
Thank you, and it is seconded by Councillor Hughes. Get my brain in place. All those in favour? It is 7:01. Thank you, Mr. Jeremy. If I looked at my paper.